He is. Now, Barack Obama recently said that failing to prepare for the aftermath of toppling Colonel Gaddafi was the worst mistake of his presidency. And in making his confession, he managed to sling a few barbs at Call Me Dave, accusing the Prime Minister of being distracted after the warplanes of Britain and its allies attacked Libya and the dictator was deposed. Since then, the country has experienced chaos and civil war rather than liberation and democracy. Now America, Britain, France, Germany and Italy meet next week, and there's speculation they may agree military support for a newly established Libyan government of national accord. But is it too late to get involved? Can we really make a difference now, or just make things worse? Here's author and journalist Rory O'Keeffe with his take of the week.
Images of Gaddafi meeting world leaders in a Bedouin tent in my former home city of Sirte have become notorious, if not iconic. So we've come to our own little This Week tent to talk about the Libya he left behind. It's fair to say that the North African country has not been a gold standard of foreign intervention for the West. Barack Obama was right to call his failure to stick around after launching his F-111s the biggest mistake of his premiership. David Cameron, who made the same mistake, could make the same admission. Because once you choose to engage in other states' politics, you can't just clear off as soon as your bombers have turned for home. The UK is proposing to do what it should have done 5 years ago, offering money and support to a Libyan government. But it spent the last 5 years preventing democratically elected administrations from using their own money to rebuild their broken nation. And even now, a major reason the UK is supporting this new government, one of 3 operating within the state, seems rather cynical. It is likely to invite new airstrikes on Libya. The driver for our renewed interest in Libya is IS, a horrific enemy, but only a bit part player in its civil war. Western governments fear that IS members are running from Syria and Iraq to Libya, but there's little evidence for that. Putting troops on the ground for training purposes is appealing, but we must remember that among the forces fighting IS in Libya are members of Al-Qaeda, and whatever scaremongers might say, it is not IS maniacs risking their lives on the Mediterranean in leaking dinghies. The lesson to be learned from Libya's grim recent past seems to be that the money is available for airstrikes, but not to enable secure states, which would make those airstrikes unnecessary.
And from the This Week Bedouin tent to the sagging guy ropes of meaningful discussion here on This Week. Rory O'Keeffe joins us now. Welcome to the programme. Now, the President says they're not planning for the day after Colonel Gaddafi's fall was his biggest mistake. But is it now too late to put that right?
There's an extent to which we could argue that the 5 years of chaos that have ensued mean that there was a massive wasted opportunity. But no, I do believe we have a responsibility and the ability to help assist Libya to right some of the wrongs.
Do we? I mean, there is this new UN-backed government of national accord. It is so uncertain. The Prime Minister had to arrive by boat because his rivals closed down the airport around Tripoli. Is that really worth supporting?
No, absolutely. It is just about a government, but there certainly is no national accord. We do have a situation in Libya now where there are 3 governments, none of which have the legitimacy or the mandate of having been elected in a popular vote. The government of national accord, unfortunately, does appear to be have been foisted upon Libya, in fact, by the international community, in the hope that it will invite airstrikes on centres of population in Libya. That doesn't seem to me to be a formula for success.
It would seem, on the face of it, if you've got a country which has got 3 governments, all well armed, all knocking lumps out of each other, this is not a place to get involved in.
Unless you want to get all your people killed, I think you're absolutely right. There is not the situation either to put in peacekeepers or to put in people who are going to be trainers. I mean, let's just go back to the beginning of Rory's film. I think, in general, the removal of the dictators has been a disaster in Western foreign policy, because what it has allowed is chaos, huge amounts of killing, and safe havens for IS and for Al-Qaeda. And it probably is too late. However, because we've made all these mistakes in the past doesn't mean that all interventions in the future would be a mistake.
No, but what about Libya?
Well, I don't think there are the conditions at the moment for an intervention, but I would certainly, if there were the hope of stability, I would certainly be in favour of supporting a government that could be a barrier to the free operation of terrorist groups that are a threat to us.
Having created the problem, do we just let them stew in their own juice?
Well, I mean, you could do a bit more bombing. That won't have any great effect. If you want to impose some sort of structure, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of troops.
A major intervention.
We don't have the capacity to do that.
There's no willpower.
There'd be no support. And if it was just the West, I mean, no one trusts the West in the Middle East anymore. I remember my first speech I've made when I was 11 years old in the school debating society was denouncing Britain's invasion of Egypt in 1956. I can't think of any intervention we've done in the Middle East that hasn't been a disaster.
Well, the talk of this meeting taking place on Monday between the Allies, it includes Germany, but they will not be involved. It will be Britain, America, France and Italy. There's talk of what they're calling a stabilisation force. This stabilisation force would go into Tripoli, would secure the airport, then start to train people there. What difference is that going to make?
It's very difficult to see what difference that would make. I do think that we have taken the wrong attitude, and we are imposing order on a situation where order cannot be imposed at this moment in time. What we need to be doing is to be working very, very hard to bring particularly the two sets of illegal militias which claim to support two of Libya's now three governments to some form of peace.
But we have been trying to do that, and they'd rather keep knocking lumps out of each other.
We really haven't tried very hard to bring an end to the Libyan civil war.
Well, how do you?
Well, I think that what we need to do is to actually engage properly with both governments. We also need to engage with the leaders of Operation Dignity, which claims to support the House of Representatives, and the Libya Dawn militia.
Well, these are the two coalitions, but one's run by a strongman, a general, who thinks he should be the next Gaddafi. Why is he going to deal with us?
Well, that is very true. I think that what we need to be talking about very, very seriously is how peace can work in Libya and what role, if any, General Khalifa Haftar takes.
You seem to downplay the importance of Islamic State, but there are about 5,000 fighters there, and I don't agree with you. I think a lot of them, the intelligence is quite strong that a lot of them have come from Syria and Iraq, as that has been degraded by bombing. 5,000, they occupy right on the central coastline in Sirte, 180 miles of that coastline, and they have been taking out a series of oil installations.
They've actually failed to take out the oil installations. They've launched a series of attacks on oil installations, which have been defended reasonably well by the Petroleum Facilities Guard.
Really? I've seen nothing but bad reports on these guys. That they're just not up to it.
Any attack on the oil facilities is bad news.
I mean, oil, when Gaddafi was the boss, oil output was 1.6 million barrels a day. It's now under 400,000.
Well, Libya is in a situation of civil war. There is a four-sided civil war going on. When you talk about me downplaying IS, I believe IS are a horrific organisation. I think they should be taken seriously. But they are the smallest of the forces fighting in Libya at the moment. And in actual fact, they are reliant on the continuation of the Libyan civil war in order to be able to operate in Libya.
If we are going to get involved in this, whether we like it or not, and there's been talk of 1,000 British troops going there as trainers, is that a matter for putting aside whether you're in favour or not, is that a matter for the government, or does Parliament have to have a say in that?
Well, I think it has been a great mistake, I'm afraid, for the government to put itself in a position where it has to go to the House of Commons in order to go to war. That will be an unpopular and, I dare say, a minority point of view, but I don't think that governments should go back to Parliament. I think that's been a great mistake. So I'm going to say the government should be allowed to do
if it wants to
this. However, if it's claiming that this is a situation that cannot become dangerous, and for that reason it doesn't need to go to Parliament, then the reasoning is clearly faulty. I mean, if you're going to send in 1,000 people, you need 1,000 people to defend them.
Yes.
You
What's
need
your
a lot
view on
more
this?
than that. And I have to
So
say,
what's your view on the idea of should governments have the freedom to do this,
No,
or
they
the room,
shouldn't.
or
I mean,
should they have to, even to deploy trainers, they have to go to Parliament?
Yes, I mean, literally, because you send 1,000 people there to do training, that's going to make London more of a target for a terrorist attack. There needs to be an open and honest debate about this in Parliament. And, I mean, for God's sake, I mean, someone comes Prime Minister, they're not a dictator. I mean, someone has to oversee them. I mean, when I was leader,
But they also have to have. I mean, they may well get it wrong. But don't they also have to have some
the terrorists. You're just
leeway?
saying that all our foreign policy is dictated by whether we're frightened of people putting bombs in London.
I think
that's a hopeless
but hang
basis on which to
let's
decide
remember,
our foreign policy.
When Blair was planning to invade Iraq, he was warned by our security services, this will make a target for terrorism. That needs to be honestly debated in Parliament.
And he may have decided that that was a secondary factor.
Yeah,
he may have decided there were more important things than that.
What was more important? I mean, if you had been a woman living in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, you could walk down the street in a miniskirt. You couldn't do that today. You'd be stoned to death.
No,
We've made it worse.
You're switching the argument. What I'm saying is the be-all and end-all of British foreign policy should not be whether we're frightened of terrorism.
Right, but let me pick up on the final point there, to come back to you, Rory, that Ken made about life under Saddam Hussein. You can agree or disagree with that, but it isn't the blunt truth that most Libyans today are probably pining for the return of Colonel Gaddafi.
Actually, funnily enough, one of the few things that most Libyans today agree on is their continued opposition to Gaddafi.
Really? How do we know that?
Well, I mean, all government members, all militia members, the vast majority of people on the streets, and I am in regular contact with people in Libya.
But 25% of Libyans are now suffering from malnutrition. The economy is now going to be the fastest tanking economy in the world this year.
Absolutely.
It's going to... Oil, which was the only source of government revenue, is at record lows.
Absolutely.
If you were an ordinary Libyan, I mean, Colonel Gaddafi was an evil dictator, but you basically had a job and you got fed.
And there were supporters of Gaddafi. That's why there was a civil war in 2011. There were people who fought in support of Gaddafi. The issue, however, is that we are now entering the third year of Libya's second civil war. Of course, the country is tanking. There is no doubt about that. And the major mistake, and there must be a discussion at some point about whether the intervention was right, but the major mistake that we made was turning our backs on Libya when Gaddafi was killed.
All right, we'll leave it there.
Well done.
We all agree on that.